the Honorable Philip Davis, Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, beautiful Bahamas. I was there just a couple of weeks ago and always very happy to come to the beautiful country. Sir Ian Winder, Chief Justice of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, other senior officials of the Caribbean Judiciary, the Honorable Andre Laveau, Consul General of Trinidad and Tobago to New York, other distinguished members of the Diplomatic Corps, Mr. Bevel Wooding, Director of the Caribbean Agency for Justice Solutions and also the Director for Caribbean Affairs for the American Registry for Internet Numbers, Mr. Einar Bolin, Vice President, Government Affairs, ARIN, Ms. Pettifer Lewis, Executive Director, CARICHAM, Permanent Secretary, Senior Government Officials and Heads of International Organizations, Mr. Nigel Edwards, the Executive Director of the Unit Trust of Trinidad and Tobago, partners and sponsors, speakers, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am honored to welcome you to this Connected Caribbean Summit 2023 on behalf of the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, or the CTU, founded in the Bahamas by the CARICOM heads of government. Our role here as CTU is to bring a perspective on the technology and policy pillars in this discussion over the next 2 days, today and tomorrow, in this meeting. The flags that you see here, for the most part, I think with the exception of one, represent the member states of the CTU, and since it was established in 1989, the CTU has been leading the charge with respect to the information and communication, or ICT, landscape in the Caribbean. Therefore, permit me to begin by making reference to a CTU-hosted experience in 2019, and I say experience as opposed to a conference, because it was entitled Caribbean Futurescape, or CFS. Some of you may remember. At the time, Prime Minister Dr. the Honorable Keith Mitchell of Grenada was there in the role as lead of science and technology in the CARICOM quasi-cabinet. CFS is a futuristic digital experience that showcases how technology can promote economic, social, and cultural integration. It is a borderless space that uses ICT to create a real-time technology immersion experience and demonstrate speed, efficiency, and transparency. In short, it demonstrated what an ICT-enabled Caribbean might look like. The CAGS, the Agency for Justice Solutions, was involved and was a key partner, demonstrating solutions that enable the more effective delivery of justice in our judicial systems, leveraging regional talent to develop and support these cutting-edge solutions. As I mentioned, some of the objectives were basically creating and promoting a single ICT space, the freedom of movement, promoting the single market and economy. That was almost 1 year before the global COVID-19 pandemic. 2 years before I would have the privilege of leading this great institution. What has happened since the landmark experience that was the Caribbean Futurescape? I recall the director of CAGS, Mr. Bevel Wooding, very distinguished gentleman, in laying out the context for this summit last night to us, indicated that it was a space for real and authentic and sincere dialogue. Are we ready for this real, authentic, and sincere dialogue? Because real, authentic, and sincere sometimes means uncomfortable. And that's why we often don't do it. I think the Master of Ceremonies also used the terms lively, intense, and robust, if you recall, just a few minutes ago. So this is just a little disclaimer. Don't blame me. You can blame Bevel, and you can blame the Master of Ceremonies if I get a bit robust. The first thing is that I'm getting a bit weary, having spent so many years. I'm getting a bit weary of conferences and meetings. It's weird because we are one, right? I understand the value of them. In fact, we hold so many at the CT ourselves. We hold meetings and we participate in meetings. Very, very important for the policy development, for engagement, and so on. I'm also wary of producing policy papers, handbooks, and strategies that do not get implemented. I understand the value of them, but I'm just a bit wary. I mentioned the experience of the Caribbean Futurescape for a reason that preceded the pandemic. It was like a calm before the storm. During the pandemics, governments who for more than a decade had national ICT strategies that spoke to online public services, and these policies sat on shelves, unimplemented, and it was difficult to get a driver's license renewed. It was difficult to get a police certificate of character. Things ground to a halt in many cases. Citizens could not cash their benefit checks. And yes, printed checks. We just had a very quick conversation about checks and cashing checks. With respect to education, our youngest citizens could not access online learning platforms, many due to the lack of economic means to do so. People shop for groceries based on the letters of their last names. Do you remember that? It wasn't that long ago, right? To encourage social distancing. If you were a T, you had to come on Wednesday between 1 and 3, and so on. Tourism was the mainstay for many of our economies, ground to a halt with the airport closures and flight cancellation. It was a very difficult time for the Caribbean. Besides the devastation of the pandemic that the pandemic brought, there are other existential threats to the Caribbean, perhaps one of the biggest being discussed as we speak. Prime Minister just returned from Dubai at COP28. This particular threat keeps us up at night. We can see it coming, and it implores us to build resilient infrastructure. Not just ICT infrastructure, but infrastructure that can withstand the effects of devastating climate events. Time does not permit me to get into issues of cybersecurity. Dr. Jules mentioned cybersecurity. He mentioned AI, next generation technologies. All of these things are coming at us. But where are we in the region in all of this? The digitally enabled Caribbean, that's one of the sessions. What's happening? Who's doing what? Where and why? Who is spending hard-earned foreign currency on foreign solutions with limited results? Where and why? Where is the transformation that we seek? I should mention that ECLAC, the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, and I believe Dr. Dale Alexander is here. There you go. They have been doing some excellent work and some excellent research on digital inclusion in the Caribbean. And I encourage you to read some of this research as it identifies some of the systematic challenges we have in the region. It points to a lack of implementation in many cases and a lack of evidence-based policy interventions. As part of that challenge, a part of that challenge is that we are not doing enough research. We're not measuring progress and leveraging the data to inform these much-needed policy interventions. Too much of what we say is often anecdotal. And ladies and gentlemen, we have to change this narrative. We have to change it fast. As the saying goes, if we are not a part of the solution, then we are a part of the problem. Are we prepared to accept that? Or do we continue to say, it's the politicians over there? I have to be careful where I point. And do we do the same thing in the same way and expect different results? Now, I would not be so naive as to think that we have all of the solutions here in this room, but I'm asking for the real change agents to please stand up. Let's stand up this week. Now is the time. I sincerely implore us to identify for each of the pillars represented here today at least 2 commitments that we have in our respective roles: technology, judiciary, private sector through the Chamber of Commerce, that we can collectively advance for the Caribbean. Let us agree that we will push for implementation of solutions in these areas that improve the lives of our citizens. We don't need to call it digital transformation. Let's just call it improving the lives of our citizens. That will have the most impact. Let us agree that we will work with international partners. We have to support our local and indigenous talent. Let us agree that not everything requires a technological solution, but everything requires a shift in our collective mindset going forward. Together as policymakers, as thought leaders and visionaries, let us leverage the boundless potential of information technology to propel our nations towards a future marked by progress, equity, and resilience. Our deliberations here today hold the power to mold the future of a digitally enabled Caribbean. Let us use that power to maximum effect. I have no doubt that this will be a wonderful meeting, but we owe it to our stakeholders, to the citizens of the Caribbean, to follow up with tangible outcomes. I wish us fruitful discussions with meaningful insights during this conference, but after this, let us do the work. Let us genuinely get to work. Let me thank the CAJS, CARICHAM, CARIBNOG, ARIN, and other partners for their support. Let's figure it out together. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.